Hello YouTube, Candice Moll here with some Australian accent tips, and today we are going to be looking at the letter D. This question has come up a few times in the comments section, so thank you to those people who have been asking questions about specific things to do with the Australian dialect. If you have questions, put them in the comments. I do read them. And if you haven't already, go ahead and hit subscribe to this channel because I've got a lot of information about how to sound Australian and then also just some fun Australian themed videos. So the letter D is very, very similar to the letter T. I have already done a video about the placement of the letter T and how to pronounce it. So a lot of those rules apply to the letter D as well. To start off, the placement of the letter D, again, just like the letter T, it's on the ridge that's behind your teeth, right here. So if you feel in your mouth, if you feel where the back of your teeth are, slide your tongue backwards until it's on the top of that little ridge before going up into the roof of your mouth. Can you feel that right here? That is where the tip of your tongue should be placed when you say the letter D. Your tongue shouldn't be against the back of your teeth because that creates a bit of a heavier sound, which is not used in English. So have a practice. If English is your second language, just really focus on placing the tip of your tongue just a little bit further back if it usually touches the back of your teeth so that you're getting a nice clean D sound. Okay? So there are 4 types of Ds in the Australian dialect, and they are the hard D, the soft D, the silent D, and the Chewy D. And I've labeled them the same as the T video to keep it clear. The most obvious one is the hard D sound, D. All right, so this will always be at the beginning of a word. For example, if I were to say don't, that first D sound is a solid, clean D, don't. Again, with the word Daniel or dog, it's just a really clean sound, D. The second type of D sound is the soft D. Now this would usually come at the end of a word or in the middle of a word. So for example, if I say the word mud, it's not a really hard sound at the end. It's just a bit softer. So where a hard D sound, I really use the tip of my tongue, D. If I use a soft D sound and say mud, it's almost like my tongue is a little bit flatter on that ridge. So rather than using like a pointy tongue here, it almost flattens out just a little bit and is just a bit of a softer sound. So usually in a sentence, if I were to say the mud is over there, that D at the end of mud, it's just a bit of a softer sound. Okay, so that's how it sounds at the end of a word. If a D falls in the middle of a word, it's also softer. So much like the soft DT sound that we would use when saying the word water, it's just a little tap of the tongue, water. And it's the same sound if I were to say muddy, okay? So words like muddy, teddy, ladder, it's all that softer D sound rather than saying muddy. It's just more of a floaty tongue, if you will. And there's one more soft D that I need to mention, and that is when a D is followed by an L. For example, the word middle. So I don't say middle. It's not that separated. The D and the L sounds kind of blend together, or at least are very quick. So the way that I would pronounce the word middle, when I hit that middle D, I place my tongue on the ridge behind my teeth, and then I leave it there and allow the just to come around my tongue. So usually the tongue placement of the L could be soft enough to touch the back of your teeth and it's okay. But when it's a D followed by an L, place your tongue where the D should go. So on that ridge, further back, not touching the back of your teeth, mid, just leave it there and just allow the back of your tongue to relax to allow the sound to come around it. Middle, okay? I hope that makes sense. The third type of D sound is the silent D. Now, the silent D sound can be at the end of a word, but it's less common than, for example, the silent T sound that comes at the end of a word. If you haven't looked at my T video, go ahead and click on over because that will make more sense if you watch them both. But if a D falls at the end of a word and it sounds like a silent D, that's really just a lazy habit. So I could say over there in the mud. All I'm doing is placing my tongue right here. But that silent D is unlikely to take place in the middle of a sentence. It's more likely to take place at the end of a sentence. So I wouldn't say the mud is over there because that would become the mud is over there. Mud is. That would become a soft D sound. So if you're going to use a silent D at the end of a word, it would only ever take place at the end of a sentence when you're not continuing to speak. But in saying that, more often than not, the D at the end of a word would just be a really soft D sound. It's over there in the mud. Okay? So, the time when a silent D is mostly used is if a D is followed by an N or an EN. For example, the word sudden. So what I'm doing is I'm placing my tongue in position to make a D sound. But because of the N, it's the same place where you would pronounce an N, by the way. I'm saying sudden, but I'm not saying sudden. It's a silent D. So all I do is place my tongue after that first syllable, sud, and then make a sound. Sudden, sa-n. And that is where the silent D comes into play. Oh, that was a fly. I'm not in Australia. What's going on? So other examples of the silent D followed by an EN would be maddening. We don't say maddening, we say maddening. Just 2 syllables, maddening. And another one is overridden, written. Okay, silent D. And the very last one is the Chewy D sound. Now, I've labelled it Chewy because the nice clean sound of the D becomes more of a J sound. So it's kind of like you're chewing on something. Ch, ch, j. Okay? So much like the Chewy T in the word Tuesday, this Chewy D comes into play when we would be saying d, y, do you. So, for example, on the word during, really what we're saying is during. If you want to be really technical about your speech, the English pronunciation is during. But in Australian English, we get a little bit lazy, and so we mix that d, y sound and make a j, during. During. It's just a little bit easier, during, okay? So it sounds just like a letter J, j. Another example of this is the word due. Now, in American English, they would say do for these spellings, D-U-E and D-E-W. But in Australian English, we make a j sound because technically it should sound like do you, but we mush it together and we say dew, all right? The dewy grass. Another time where this Chewy D will be used, like in these words, is if somebody were to say, do you? So if I were to ask, do you want to go? Do you? I could say that, do you want to go? is how it would come out of my mouth quickly. But often that do you will get mushed into that j sound. Do you wanna go? Do you wanna? So that's another little, it's more of a slang terminology. Do you wanna? But it will happen naturally in Australian speech if somebody is speaking quickly. And the other time where this Chewy D will come into play is if a D is followed by an R. For example, the word drum, dr, dr. That D sound becomes that muddier j sound because of the dr, drummer. Another example is drain or drive, dra. So make sure that your tongue starts, for those DR combinations, make sure that your tongue starts in the D position here and kind of slide it back into that sound, dr, drum. Okay? So I hope this has helped you understand the placement of the letter D and also the different types of D sounds that are in Australian English. If you have liked this video, please give me a thumbs up. Also, if that little subscribe button underneath this video is still red in color, that means that you haven't subscribed to my channel. And I think I should point out that subscribing to the channel is free. I know that I have a lot of viewers who haven't subscribed, so do me a favor and click that button because it supports me, it supports my channel, and then it will also help you to know when I have new information coming out. Okay? I hope you're having a great week, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!